The blood-red sunset cast long shadows across Wilson, Kansas, as Olivia Foster ducked beneath the swinging doors of the Lone Star Saloon, desperate to escape the jeering crowd that had followed her down Main Street. Her heart pounded against her ribs like a wild Mustang, her breath coming in ragged gasps as she pressed her back against the weathered wooden wall, closing her eyes against the tears threatening to fall. The year was 1876, and Wilson was growing from a dusty railroad stop into a proper cattle town. For most, it represented opportunity. For Olivia, it had become a prison of whispers and pointed fingers. "Well now, what brings a lady like yourself in here at this hour?" The deep, melodic voice startled her, and her eyes flew open to meet the steady gaze of a man she'd never seen before. Isaac Quinn stood behind the bar, polishing a glass with a clean rag, his dark eyes assessing but not unkind. His broad shoulders filled out a simple cotton shirt, and though he wasn't wearing a gun belt inside the establishment, something about his posture suggested he knew how to handle himself. "I'm not." Olivia started, then stopped herself. She straightened her spine and lifted her chin. "I needed a moment of peace." Isaac's eyebrow arched slightly as he looked past her to the window, where several faces were still pressed against the glass. With deliberate slowness, he set down his glass and walked around the bar. Olivia tensed as he approached, but he merely moved past her to the door, which he opened wide. "This establishment is closed for the afternoon, gentlemen," he announced to the small crowd. "I suggest you find your entertainment elsewhere." Several protests rose from the group, but something in Isaac's stance made them reconsider. One by one, they dispersed, muttering as they went. Isaac closed the door and returned to his position behind the bar. "Now, miss, can I offer you something to drink? Water, perhaps? Or something stronger?" Olivia hesitated, then moved to perch on one of the bar stools. "Water would be fine, thank you." As he poured her drink, she took the opportunity to study him. He was new to Wilson; she would have remembered him otherwise. His dark hair was neatly trimmed, though a few wayward strands fell across his forehead. His hands were calloused but clean, and he moved with the quiet confidence of a man comfortable in his own skin. "I'm Isaac Quinn," he offered, sliding the glass toward her. "Just bought this place from old Tom Fletcher last week." "Olivia Foster," she replied automatically, then immediately regretted it. Recognition would flash in his eyes any moment now, followed by the familiar look of either pity or disgust. She braced herself, but Isaac merely nodded. "A pleasure, Miss Foster. New in town myself, just rode in from Colorado, decided it was time to put down some roots." Relief washed over her. He didn't know. For this brief moment she could simply be Olivia, not the woman with the ruined reputation, not the daughter of the disgraced banker, not the sister of a murderer. "What brings you to Wilson?" he asked conversationally, resuming his glass polishing. The question was innocent enough, but Olivia stiffened. "I was born here," she said shortly. Isaac nodded, seemingly unperturbed by her curt response. "It seems like a decent town, bit rough around the edges, but I've seen worse." A bitter laugh escaped her before she could stop it. "Decent? Perhaps for some." His dark eyes studied her face. "I've found most places are what you make of them." "And sometimes," Olivia countered, "what they make of you." A shout from outside drew their attention. Two cowboys were facing off in the street, hands hovering near their holsters. Isaac sighed heavily. "Excuse me a moment, Miss Foster. Seems I need to prevent a mess I just have to clean up." He moved from behind the bar with surprising speed, his long strides carrying him out the door before she could respond. Olivia followed to the window, watching as he positioned himself between the two men. She couldn't hear his words, but his calm demeanor seemed to diffuse the tension. After a few minutes, The cowboys reluctantly parted ways, and Isaac returned to the saloon. "Do you always intervene in other people's quarrels?" she asked as he re-entered. "Only when they're about to spill blood on my doorstep," he replied with a slight smile. "Bad for business." Something about his easy manner made her own tension begin to ebb. She found herself returning to the barstool rather than heading for the door. "So what happened out there?" she asked, gesturing toward the street. "The usual. A disagreement over a card game inflamed by whiskey and pride." Isaac shrugged. "Nothing worth dying over, though they didn't see it that way until I pointed out the sheriff was heading this direction." "Sheriff Monroe isn't known for his gentle handling of troublemakers," Olivia agreed. "You seem to know the town well." "As I said, I was born here." She traced a pattern in the condensation on her glass. "Though lately, I sometimes think it would have been better if I hadn't been." Isaac leaned against the bar, regarding her thoughtfully. "That's a heavy statement." "It's a heavy town," she replied. Before he could respond, the door swung open again and Olivia tensed. A middle-aged woman in a practical dress entered, arms loaded with linens. "Mr. Quinn, I've brought the clean tablecloths you asked for." The woman stopped short when she saw Olivia, her eyes widening. "Oh, I didn't realize you had company." The emphasis on the last word wasn't lost on Olivia. She slid from the stool, smoothing her skirts. "I was just leaving, Mrs. Hawkins." The woman's lips pursed disapprovingly. "I should think so. A respectable establishment won't stay that way long with your sort frequenting it." "Martha," Isaac's voice held a warning note. "That's enough." But Olivia was already moving toward the door, her cheeks burning with humiliation. "Thank you for the water, Mr. Quinn." "Miss Foster," he began, but she was already gone, the swinging doors closing behind her as she stepped into the fading daylight. Isaac turned to the older woman, his expression stern. "Mrs. Hawkins, I don't know what just happened, but I won't have anyone spoken to like that in my establishment." Martha Hawkins set the linens down with a huff. "You're new here, Mr. Quinn, so I'll overlook your ignorance this once. But that woman is trouble. Her brother killed a man in cold blood not 6 months ago, shot him right in the back, and her father embezzled half the town's savings before hanging himself in shame. The Foster name is mud in Wilson, and anyone associated with it risks the same." Isaac absorbed this information silently, his gaze drawn to the window where he could still see Olivia's retreating figure, her shoulders squared against the weight of the town's judgment. "I appreciate the warning, Mrs. Hawkins," he said finally. "But in my saloon, everyone starts with a clean slate." The woman clucked her tongue disapprovingly, but said nothing more as she began arranging the fresh tablecloths. Isaac returned to his position behind the bar, his thoughts lingering on the haunted look in Olivia Foster's eyes. It was just past dawn the next morning when Olivia slipped out of her small house at the edge of town. These early hours were her salvation, the time when she could move through Wilson without enduring the stares and whispers that followed her like shadows during daylight. She made her way to the general store, hoping to complete her shopping before the town fully awakened. Mr. Jameson, the proprietor, didn't like serving her, but he disliked losing business even more, so he tolerated her early visits with stony silence. To her surprise, she found Isaac Quinn already at the counter, engaged in friendly conversation with the shopkeeper. Both men turned at the sound of the bell above the door. "Morning, Miss Foster," Isaac greeted her, tipping his hat. Mr. Jameson's smile vanished, replaced by his usual cold stare. "Mr. Quinn," she acknowledged with a nod, moving to the far side of the store to gather her meager list of necessities. She could feel Mr. Jameson's eyes following her, making sure she didn't pocket anything. The humiliation of it burned, but she kept her head high. She had endured worse in the past 6 months. When she approached the counter with her items, Isaac was still there, seemingly in no hurry to leave. "Put it on my account, would you, Jameson?" he said casually. "That won't be necessary," Olivia said quickly. "I can pay for my own goods." Isaac smiled, and she noticed for the first time the slight crinkles at the corners of his eyes. "Consider it a welcome to the neighborhood. I just learned you live down the lane from my new property." Mr. Jameson's eyebrows shot up. "You bought the old Miller place, signed the papers yesterday," Isaac confirmed. "Needs work, but the bones are good, and Miss Foster here will be my closest neighbor." Olivia felt the weight of Jameson's disapproving gaze. "Mr. Quinn, I don't think it's settled," Isaac interrupted smoothly. "Jameson, add the lady's purchases to my bill." Before she could protest further, he gathered her items into a paper package and handed it to her with a slight bow. "May I walk with you, Miss Foster? I'd appreciate your insights about the area." She wanted to refuse, to tell him that being seen with her would only damage his standing in the community before he'd even established himself. But something in his direct gaze challenged her, and she found herself nodding. They left the store together, Mr. Jameson's disapproving look burning into their backs. "You shouldn't have done that," Olivia said once they were outside. "People will talk." Isaac chuckled. "People always talk, Miss Foster. In my experience, most of what they say isn't worth listening to." "You don't understand what it's like here," she insisted. "Wilson has a long memory and little forgiveness." "Then educate me," he said, falling into step beside her. "What exactly are they holding against you? I've heard rumors, but I'd prefer the truth." Olivia stopped walking, turning to face him directly. "Why? So you can satisfy your curiosity before wisely distancing yourself," his expression sobered. "No, madam, so I can understand what I'm up against." "What you're up against," she repeated, confused. "I don't like bullies, Miss Foster." "Never have. And from what I've seen, this town is bullying you something fierce." Olivia stared at him, searching for the mockery in his face, but found none. "My father was the banker here," she said finally. "He made some poor decisions with other people's money. When it was discovered, he took his own life rather than face the consequences." "I'm sorry," Isaac said quietly. "My brother Daniel couldn't handle the shame. He started drinking, got into a fight with the mayor's son. Things escalated and—" She swallowed hard. "He shot him. Claimed it was self-defense, but witnesses said otherwise. He's serving 20 years in the territorial prison." "And you?" "I was guilty of being their family," she said simply. "The town decided that was enough." Isaac nodded slowly. "And what do you do now? How do you support yourself?" "I teach piano to the few children whose parents still allow them near me. And I sew mending mostly, some dressmaking when I can get the work. It's enough to keep the house, barely." They resumed walking, the early morning sun casting long shadows ahead of them. "It's not right," Isaac said after a moment. "Perhaps not, but it's the way of things. I've accepted it." "Have you?" he challenged. "Is that why you run your errands at dawn and hide in saloons from angry mobs?" Her cheeks flushed. "I was not hiding. I was simply seeking a moment of peace," he finished for her, echoing her words from the day before. "I understand the need for that better than most." They had reached the fork in the road where their paths would diverge, her small cottage visible just beyond a stand of cottonwoods, the dilapidated Miller place a quarter-mile further. "This is where we part ways, Mr. Quinn," she said formally. "Thank you for the assistance this morning." "Isaac," he corrected. "And you're welcome, Miss Foster." "Olivia," she found herself saying. "If we're to be neighbors," he smiled, and something warm unfurled in her chest. "Olivia, then, I suspect I'll be seeing you around." "I suspect you will," she agreed, surprising herself with the hope that crept into her voice. As she watched him continue down the road, she couldn't help but wonder what had brought this unusual man to Wilson and why. Unlike everyone else, he seemed determined to see past the name she carried. Over the next few weeks, Olivia found herself encountering Isaac with increasing frequency. He appeared at her gate one evening with a basket of fresh eggs, claiming his newly acquired hens were laying more than any single man could eat. Another day, he arrived with a broken pocket watch, wondering if she knew anyone who might repair it, a transparent excuse, as Wilson had a perfectly competent watchmaker on Main Street. Each time she told herself to send him away, to make it clear that his friendly overtures were unwelcome or at least unwise. But each time, she found herself inviting him to sit on her porch for a few minutes, their conversations stretching longer with each visit. She learned that he had fought for the Union in the war, though he spoke little of those years. He had tried his hand at ranching in Colorado before deciding that the life of a saloon owner might be less backbreaking, if more complicated. He had no family to speak of, lost them young, was all he said on the matter, and had spent most of his adult life drifting from place to place. "What made you stop here?" she asked one evening as they watched the sunset paint the prairie in shades of amber and gold. Of all the towns in Kansas, why choose Wilson? Isaac considered the question, taking a slow sip from the lemonade she had offered. "Truth is, I wasn't planning to, was just passing through on my way to Wichita. But sometimes a place just feels right, you know, like it's been waiting for you." Olivia raised an eyebrow skeptically. "Wilson was waiting for you," he laughed, the sound rich and warm in the evening air. "Maybe not Wilson exactly, but something here made me want to stay." His eyes met hers briefly before returning to the horizon, still figuring out what that might be. The implication hung between them, unacknowledged but unmistakable. Olivia felt her cheeks warm and changed the subject hastily. The town had noticed their growing acquaintance, of course. Whispers followed her more intensely than before, and she caught snippets of conversation about that poor Quinn fellow, and how he'd regret tangling with the Foster girl. The Lone Star Saloon saw a slight drop in business, as some of the more gossipy patrons took their custom to the rougher establishment at the edge of town. If Isaac noticed, he gave no sign of it. His saloon was gradually transforming under his care, the scarred tables replaced, the grimy windows cleaned, the floor swept daily. He hired a cook who could prepare decent meals, and word began to spread that the Lone Star was becoming a respectable place where a man might bring his wife for supper without embarrassment. It was after one such evening, nearly a month after their first meeting, that everything changed. Olivia had just finished her weekly piano lesson with young Emma Parker, one of her few remaining students, when she heard the commotion outside. She opened her door to find 3 men on horseback in her yard. She recognized them immediately. William Thorpe and his brothers, sons of the wealthiest rancher in the county. William had once courted her before her family's disgrace. Now his face was flushed with drink and something uglier. "Well, if it isn't the lovely Miss Foster," William drawled, swaying slightly in his saddle. "Heard you've been entertaining our new saloon keeper. Didn't think you had it in you." Emma clutched at Olivia's skirts, her small face frightened. "Inside, Emma," Olivia murmured, gently pushing the child behind her. "Your mother will be here soon." "Don't be sending the little one away," William said, dismounting clumsily. "She should know what kind of woman's teaching her to play the pianoforte." "You're drunk, William," Olivia said evenly. "Go home before you say something you'll regret," he laughed, an ugly sound that made her skin crawl. "Only thing I regret is not seeing what a lying piece of trash you were before your daddy showed his true colors." His brothers snickered, still mounted on their horses. "Mr. Thorpe." Emma's mother appeared at the gate, her expression horrified as she took in the scene. "What is the meaning of this?" "Just having a friendly chat with Miss Foster," William said, turning his charm on for Mrs. Parker. "No harm intended." "Emma, come here at once, Mrs. Parker commanded, holding out her hand. The little girl ran to her mother, who gathered her close. "Miss Foster, I believe this will be Emma's last lesson." Olivia's heart sank, but she nodded stiffly. "I understand, Mrs. Parker." As mother and daughter hurried away, William's smirk widened. "See that? You're poison, Olivia. Everything you touch turns rotten. That new friend of yours will figure it out soon enough." "Leave my property, William," Olivia said, her voice surprisingly steady despite the fear coursing through her. "Now." He took a step closer. "Or what?" "You'll call for help. Who in this town would come running for Banker Foster's daughter?" "I would." The quiet voice from behind the Thorpe brothers made them all turn. Isaac stood at the gate, his expression calm but his eyes hard as steel. He had removed his jacket, and the gun belt at his hip was clearly visible. "Evening, gentlemen," he said, his tone pleasant but carrying an undercurrent of danger. "Seems to me this visit has run its course." William's face darkened. "This doesn't concern you, Quinn." "When 3 men harass a lady on her own property, it becomes my concern." Isaac moved closer, his stride unhurried but purposeful. "Especially when that lady is a friend of mine." "Friend?" William spat the word. "Is that what they're calling it these days?" "Do you know what her family did to this town?" "I know what she didn't do," Isaac replied evenly. "And I know 3 drunk men harassing a woman isn't the mark of any kind of honor I recognize." The 2 younger Thorpe brothers exchanged glances, clearly uncomfortable with the turn the confrontation had taken. "Come on, Will," one of them urged. "Let's head back to town." But William stood his ground, his hand drifting toward the revolver at his hip. "You threatening me, Quinn?" "Not at all," Isaac said with a slight smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Just suggesting it might be in everyone's best interest if you continued your evening elsewhere." For a tense moment, Olivia thought William might draw. But something in Isaac's steady gaze must have sobered him, for he finally turned away with a forced laugh. "Keep your ruined woman, Quinn. You deserve each other." He mounted his horse clumsily, nearly falling before riding himself. With a final glare, he wheeled the animal around and galloped off, his brothers following close behind. The silence that fell after their departure seemed deafening. Olivia realized she was trembling only when Isaac approached and gently touched her elbow. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice soft with concern. She nodded, not trusting herself to speak immediately. When she finally found her voice, it was barely above a whisper. "Thank you. No need for thanks. Those boys needed a lesson in manners." His attempt at lightness fell flat as he studied her pale face. "Has this happened before?" "Not quite like this," she admitted. "Usually it's just whispers, people crossing the street to avoid me." William was particularly bitter. "We were engaged before everything happened." Isaac's expression darkened. He had no right. "Few in this town believe I have any rights left," she said with a hollow laugh. Then, gathering herself, she added, "You shouldn't have intervened, Isaac. You've only made things worse for yourself." "I disagree," he said simply. "You don't understand what they can do. William's father owns half the county. He could ruin your business with a word. Let him try." Isaac's jaw set in a determined line. "I've faced worse than spoiled ranchers' sons." Olivia shook her head, frustration welling up. "Why are you doing this? Why risk everything you're building here for? For me, I'm not worth it. Nobody in this town would blame you for walking away." "That's where you're wrong, Olivia." His voice was gentle but firm. "You are worth it, and I don't much care what this town thinks." The sincerity in his eyes made something crack inside her, a wall she had carefully built over months of isolation and shame. Tears she had refused to shed in public spilled down her cheeks. "Nobody could love me," she whispered, the words torn from some wounded place deep inside. "Not now, not after everything. I'm ruined, Isaac," just like William said. Instead of stepping away as she expected, Isaac moved closer. With infinite tenderness, he brushed a tear from her cheek. "Then nobody hasn't met you properly," he said softly, "because I find myself halfway there already." Her breath caught, disbelief warring with the desperate hope his words kindled. "You can't mean that." "I rarely say things I don't mean, Olivia Foster." His smile was gentle. "And I intend to prove it to you if you'll let me." "How?" The word was barely audible. "One day at a time," he promised, "for as long as it takes." As the sun set over the Kansas prairie, casting long shadows across her small yard, Olivia allowed herself to believe, just for a moment, that perhaps this unusual cowboy-turned-saloon keeper might be the one person in Wilson who could see beyond her family's sins to the woman she truly was. What neither of them noticed was the figure watching from the road, his face twisted with jealousy and anger. William Thorpe spat on the ground before turning his horse toward town, a plan already forming in his alcohol-fueled mind. Isaac kept his word. Day by day, in small gestures and quiet moments, he began showing Olivia what it meant to be valued for herself alone. He started by inviting her to play the piano in his saloon on Friday evenings, offering a wage that made her suspicious, until he pointed out that business improved considerably when there was proper music. "It's purely selfish on my part," he insisted, though the twinkle in his eye suggested otherwise. The first night she performed was terrifying. She sat rigid at the upright piano in the corner of the Lone Star, her fingers trembling slightly as she began to play. The regular patrons stared, some whispering behind their hands. But Isaac moved throughout the room with easy confidence, his presence a silent challenge to anyone who might consider making her uncomfortable. By the third song, the atmosphere had shifted. The music, a mix of popular tunes and classical pieces, filled the saloon with warmth that even the most hardened skeptics found difficult to resist. A few of the men requested their favorites, and when she obliged with a spirited rendition of "Buffalo Gals," spontaneous applause broke out. As weeks passed, her Friday performances became a regular feature that drew increasing crowds. Isaac expanded to Saturday nights as well, and soon Olivia found herself earning more than she had from all her piano students combined. More than the money, though, she valued the restoration of purpose. Music had always been her refuge, but now it became her bridge back to the community that had shunned her. Not everyone was won over. Of course, there were still those who refused to enter the Lone Star while she was there, but gradually, she noticed fewer crossed streets, fewer averted gazes when she walked through town. Isaac never pushed for more than friendship, though his affection was evident in countless small ways. The fresh flowers that appeared on the piano before her performances, the way he always walked her home afterward regardless of the hour, the books he lent her from his surprisingly extensive collection. They fell into an easy rhythm, sharing Sunday afternoon rides across the prairie, quiet conversations on her porch, occasional suppers at his newly renovated house. Olivia found herself laughing again, something she had nearly forgotten how to do in the dark months following her family's downfall. It was during one such Sunday ride, nearly 3 months after their first meeting, that Isaac finally spoke of his past. They had stopped to rest their horses by a small creek, sitting side by side on a fallen log as they shared the lunch Olivia had packed. The autumn air was crisp, the prairie grasses golden in the afternoon light, I had a wife once, Isaac said suddenly, his gaze fixed on the horizon. Her name was Sarah. Olivia felt a strange tightness in her chest. In all their conversations, he had never mentioned a wife. What happened to her? Cholera, in 67. His voice was steady, but she could hear the old pain beneath the words. We'd been married just 2 years, had a little farm outside Springfield, Illinois. I'm so sorry, she said softly. He nodded, acknowledging her sympathy. After I buried her, I couldn't bear to stay. Sold the farm, drifted west. Tried ranching, mining, even rode for the Pony Express for a spell before the war. Nothing seemed to matter much. And now, she ventured. His eyes met hers, warm and direct. Now things are starting to matter again. The simple statement hung between them, weighted with meaning neither was quite ready to put into words. Olivia looked away first, her cheeks warming. Is that why you defended me? Because you know what it's like to lose everything? Partly, he admitted. But mostly because you didn't deserve the treatment you were receiving, still don't. Some would say I'm paying for my family's sins. Isaac shook his head firmly. That's not how justice works, Olivia. At least, it's not how it should work. The world rarely operates as it should, she observed. True enough. He picked up a small stone and skipped it across the creek's surface. But that doesn't mean we have to accept it. They sat in companionable silence for a while, listening to the gentle burble of the water and the rustling of wind through the prairie grass. Isaac, Olivia said finally, you should know that William Thorpe has been making things difficult for you. I've heard he's been telling people to avoid your saloon, claiming improper things about our relationship. Isaac chuckled. I'm aware. Though his campaign doesn't seem to be working very well, business is better than ever. Still, I worry about your reputation. My reputation. He raised an eyebrow. I'm a former Union soldier running a saloon in a town that leans Confederate. My reputation was questionable from the start. You know what I mean. His expression sobered. I do. And I appreciate your concern, Olivia, but I'm a grown man who can make his own decisions about who deserves my friendship and respect. The word friendship stung slightly, though she told herself it shouldn't. What had she expected him to say? That he was falling in love with her. That would be foolish for both of them. We should head back, she said, rising from the log. Clouds are moving in from the west. Isaac glanced at the sky where dark thunderheads were indeed gathering on the horizon. You have a good eye for weather. Growing up on the prairie teaches you to read the sky, she replied, moving toward her horse. He caught her hand before she could mount, his fingers warm against hers. Olivia. She turned, startled by the intensity in his voice. I meant what I said that night at your house. About proving something to you, I still intend to, her heart quickened. And what is that exactly? That you are worthy of being loved, thoroughly, completely, without reservation. His eyes held hers, unwavering. If you'll allow it. For a moment she couldn't breathe, couldn't think. Then reality reasserted itself. Isaac, you can't. We can't. This town will never accept. I'm not asking the town, he interrupted gently. I'm asking you. A raindrop fell, then another, the storm approaching faster than either had anticipated. Olivia pulled her hand from his grasp and mounted her horse with practiced ease. We should hurry, she called over her shoulder, already urging her mount into a trot. Isaac watched her for a moment, something like resignation crossing his features before he too swung into the saddle. They rode hard for Wilson, the storm chasing at their heels. They were still a mile from town when the sky opened. Rain fell in sheets, turning the dirt road to mud within minutes. Lightning flashed, followed almost immediately by thunderclaps that made the horses skittish. My house is closer, Isaac shouted over the deluge. We should wait it out there. Olivia hesitated only briefly before nodding her agreement. They turned off the main road, following a smaller track to Isaac's property. By the time they reached the shelter of his porch, they were both drenched to the skin. Isaac quickly stabled the horses while Olivia waited, shivering despite the relative warmth of the autumn day. "Come inside," Isaac urged when he returned, opening the door to his home. "You need to get dry before you catch your death." The interior of the house was simple but comfortable, with solid furniture and a few personal touches that spoke of Isaac's efforts to make it a home. Bookshelves filled with well-worn volumes, a colorful quilt draped over the back of a chair, a landscape painting hanging above the fireplace. "Wait here," he said, disappearing down a hallway and returning moments later with a towel and what appeared to be one of his shirts. "It's not ideal, but it's dry. You can change in the bedroom while I get a fire going." Olivia accepted the offerings gratefully and retreated to the room he indicated. It was sparsely furnished but neat, with a large bed covered in the same style of quilt she had noticed in the sitting room. She stripped off her sodden riding dress and petticoats, using the towel to dry her hair and skin before pulling on Isaac's shirt. It fell nearly to her knees, the fabric soft against her skin, and carrying his scent, a mixture of soap, leather, and something distinctly him. When she emerged, Isaac had a fire crackling in the hearth and was setting a kettle to boil on the cookstove. He had changed as well, into dry trousers and a fresh shirt with the sleeves rolled up to his elbows. "Better?" he asked, glancing up at her approach. She nodded, suddenly self-conscious of her state of undress despite being more covered than she would be in a modest bathing costume. "The rain shows no sign of letting up," she observed, moving to the window where water streamed down the glass. "Good thing we're not made of sugar then," Isaac replied lightly. "Tea will be ready shortly. Might help warm you up." Olivia moved closer to the fire, extending her hands toward its warmth. "Your home is lovely, Isaac. You've done wonders with the old Miller place." "It's coming along," he agreed, joining her by the hearth. "Still plenty to do before winter sets in properly." They stood side by side, watching the flames dance. The intimacy of the moment alone in his house, wearing his clothing, the storm isolating them from the rest of the world made Olivia acutely aware of him in a way she hadn't allowed herself to be before. "Olivia," Isaac said softly, "about what I said at the creek." "You don't need to explain," she interrupted quickly. "The storm has passed now." He turned to face her fully. "I'm not talking about the weather. I know." She met his gaze reluctantly. "But perhaps it's better if we don't discuss it further. Some things are impossible, regardless of what we might wish." "Are they?" he challenged gently. "Or are we just afraid to find out?" The kettle began to whistle, saving her from having to answer immediately. Isaac moved to the stove, preparing 2 cups of tea with practiced movements. "I've never been one to run from a challenge," he continued as he worked. "Even when the odds seemed stacked against me, maybe especially then. This isn't a battle to be won, Isaac." Olivia accepted the steaming cup he offered. "The people of Wilson have long memories and deep prejudices. They'll never accept me, and by extension, they'll never accept us." "So you're saying there could be in us to accept?" A smile played at the corners of his mouth. Despite herself, Olivia felt an answering smile tug at her lips. "You're impossible." "I prefer determined." A crash of thunder shook the house, making them both start. The rain intensified, drumming against the roof with renewed vigor. "Looks like we may be here a while longer," Isaac observed, moving to stoke the fire. "Would you like something to eat? I'm no gourmet, but I can manage bacon and eggs." The simple offer of hospitality, combined with the comfort of the warm house against the backdrop of the storm, created a sense of domesticity that made Olivia's heart ache with longing for what couldn't be. And yet, for these stolen hours, Perhaps she could pretend. "That sounds wonderful," she said softly. They prepared the meal together, moving around each other in the small kitchen with surprising ease. Isaac proved to be a competent cook, and Olivia found herself relaxing as they worked side by side, the tension of their earlier conversation gradually dissipating. By the time they sat down to eat, the atmosphere between them had returned to the comfortable camaraderie they had developed over the past months. They talked of inconsequential things, a new book Isaac had ordered from Chicago, Olivia's plans to plant a larger garden in the spring, town gossip about who was courting whom. It was only as they were washing the dishes together that Isaac returned to more serious matters. "I've been thinking about expanding the saloon," he said casually, drying a plate. "Adding a proper restaurant section, maybe even a small hotel above." Olivia handed him another plate. "That sounds ambitious. Wilson's growing. The railroad brings new faces through every week. Most have to ride another 10 miles to find decent accommodations." "True enough," she agreed, "but it would be a significant investment. I have the funds." He set the dried plate aside. "What I lack is someone with a head for figures to help manage the business side of things. Someone I trust." She paused in her washing, looking up at him with sudden understanding. "Are you offering me a position, Mr. Quinn?" His eyes met hers steadily. "I'm offering you a partnership, Miss Foster." "A partnership," she repeated slowly. "You have the education and the abilities. I've seen your account books. You've managed to keep your household running on next to nothing through sheer financial wizardry. The saloon's books are a mess compared to yours. You've seen my account books." He had the grace to look slightly abashed. "You left them open on your table one day when I called. I wasn't snooping intentionally." Olivia shook her head, bemused. "A lady's financial records are nearly as private as her diary, Isaac." "Then consider it fortunate that I was impressed rather than scandalized," he countered with a smile. "Will you consider it? The position would come with a proper salary, of course, more than the piano playing, though I'd hope you'd continue with that as well." The offer was tempting, more than tempting. It would provide the financial security she had been struggling to maintain since her father's death. But what would people say? A respectable business can't have a woman like me as its public face. Isaac set down his towel, his expression serious. "First, you are every bit as respectable as any woman in this town, more so than most, in my estimation. Second, I don't give a damn what people say. And third," his voice softened, "this isn't just about business, Olivia. Surely you know that." The truth of his words hung between them, impossible to ignore or dismiss. The rain continued to fall outside, cocooning them in this moment of honesty. "I can't give you what you want, Isaac," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "A future with me would be filled with whispers and closed doors. You deserve better." He stepped closer, taking the dish from her hands and setting it aside. "Let me decide what I deserve, Olivia, and what I want." His hands came up to frame her face gently. "All I'm asking is that you give us a chance to find out what might be possible." The tenderness in his touch undid her. Tears filled her eyes as she allowed herself, just for a moment, to lean into his strength. "I'm afraid," she admitted. "Not of the town or its judgments, but of hoping again. It hurts too much when hope dies." "Then we'll take it one day at a time," Isaac promised. "No expectations, no demands, just two people figuring things out together." Outside, the storm began to ease, the thunder now a distant rumble. Inside, something shifted between them, not yet a declaration, but an acknowledgement of possibility. Olivia took a deep breath and stepped back slightly, though not entirely away from his touch. "I'll consider the business proposition," she said with a small smile. "The rest." Perhaps we could indeed take that one day at a time. The relief and joy that crossed Isaac's face was worth the risk she was taking. "That's all I ask," he said softly. By the time the rain stopped completely, Olivia's clothes had dried enough to be wearable again. As she changed back into her own garments, she reflected on the strange turn the day had taken, and how, despite her fears, she couldn't bring herself to regret a moment of it. Isaac insisted on riding home with her, though the hour was not yet late. The world smelled fresh after the rain, the prairie gleaming in the late afternoon sunlight that had broken through the departing clouds. At her gate, he helped her dismount, his hands lingering at her waist perhaps a moment longer than strictly necessary. "Thank you for the pleasure of your company today, Miss Foster," he said formally, though his eyes held the warmth of their shared understanding. "The pleasure was mine, Mr. Quinn," she replied, matching his tone. Then more softly, "Thank you, Isaac, for everything." He tipped his hat, a smile playing at his lips. "Until tomorrow, then." "Until tomorrow," she confirmed, and for the first time in months, found herself genuinely looking forward to what the new day might bring. As winter descended upon Wilson, transforming the prairie with blankets of snow and biting winds, Olivia found herself busier than she had been since before her family's disgrace. True to his word, Isaac had hired her to manage the financial aspects of the Lone Star, and together they were planning the expansion that would begin in the spring. Their partnership extended beyond business. 3 evenings a week, Olivia played the piano at the saloon, her repertoire expanding to include Christmas carols as the holiday season approached. On Sundays, weather permitting, they still rode together, exploring the stark beauty of the winter landscape. Other evenings were spent in comfortable conversation by the fire, sometimes at her cottage, sometimes at his home. The town watched their growing relationship with mixed reactions. Some, like Mrs. Hawkins, predicted disaster. "Mark my words," she declared loudly to anyone who would listen. "That Foster woman will bring him to ruin just like her father did to half the town." Others were more circumspect, waiting to see how things would develop. A few, particularly those who had come to enjoy Olivia's music at the saloon, began to soften their stance, greeting her with cautious nods when they passed on the street. William Thorpe remained a shadow over their happiness. His attempts to damage Isaac's business had largely failed, but his bitter comments and veiled threats continued. More than once, Olivia caught him watching her from across the street, his expression dark with malice. "He won't do anything," Isaac assured her when she expressed her concerns. "He's all talk." But Olivia wasn't convinced. She had known William since childhood, had been engaged to him briefly before everything fell apart. There was a cruelty in him that had always lurked beneath his charming exterior, a willingness to hurt those who crossed him. Her fears proved justified the week before Christmas. The Lone Star was hosting a small celebration, with special food, mulled wine, and Olivia playing seasonal music. The saloon was full, the atmosphere festive despite the blizzard that had descended upon Wilson earlier in the day. Olivia was in the middle of silent night when the doors burst open, admitting a swirl of snow and 5 men, William Thorpe at their head. They were clearly drunk, stamping snow from their boots and laughing too loudly. Isaac moved immediately to intercept them. "Evening, gentlemen. Welcome to the Lone Star. Find yourselves a table and we'll be right with you." William's gaze fixed on Olivia, a malicious smile spreading across his face. "Well, if it isn't the banker's daughter entertaining the masses. How far you've fallen, Olivia." The saloon fell silent, the holiday cheer evaporating as tension filled the room. Olivia's fingers stilled on the keys, but she held her head high, refusing to show fear. "Mr. Thorpe," Isaac said, his voice pleasant but carrying an edge of steel, "I'll thank you to keep a civil tongue in my establishment." William turned his attention to Isaac, swaying slightly. "Your establishment, that's rich. Everyone knows it's just a matter of time before you run it into the ground, especially with her help." He jerked his head toward Olivia. "I think you gentlemen have had enough celebration for one evening," Isaac said firmly. "Perhaps you'd be more comfortable at the Red Dog down the street." "Are you refusing to serve us, Quinn?" one of William's companions demanded. "Not at all. I'm simply suggesting you might find the atmosphere more to your liking elsewhere." William laughed, an ugly sound. "The atmosphere here is exactly what we came for." He turned to face the room at large. "Don't you good people want to know what kind of woman is playing your Christmas music? The daughter of a thief and a sister to a murderer, who's now warming the bed of—" He never finished the sentence. Isaac's fist connected with his jaw, sending him sprawling across a nearby table. The saloon erupted into chaos as William's friends rushed to his defense, while Isaac's regular patrons moved to support the saloon keeper. Olivia watched in horror as the brawl spread, glasses shattering and furniture overturning. She caught glimpses of Isaac in the melee, holding his own against two of William's friends while the other patrons dealt with the rest. Sheriff Monroe arrived minutes later, his deputies in tow, firing a shot into the ceiling to get everyone's attention. "That's enough," he roared. "The next man who throws a punch spends Christmas in my jail." The fighting subsided gradually, men disentangling themselves from one another with muttered curses and threatened retribution. William rose to his feet, blood streaming from his nose and a rapidly swelling bruise forming on his jaw. "I want him arrested," he slurred, pointing at Isaac. "He assaulted me, unprovoked." Sheriff Monroe surveyed the destruction with a weary expression. "From what I heard on my way in, there was plenty of provocation, Thorpe. Now all of you clear out. Saloon's closed for the night." "You can't do that," William protested. Your father isn't here," the sheriff cut him off. "And if he were, I suspect he'd be ashamed to see his son acting like a common drunk. Now go home before I change my mind about those cells." Sullen but cowed, William and his friends departed, leaving behind a wrecked saloon and a tense silence. "You too, folks," Sheriff Monroe addressed the remaining patrons. "Show's over for tonight." As people began to file out into the snowy night, Isaac made his way to Olivia, who hadn't moved from the piano bench. "Are you all right?" he asked, gently touching her shoulder. She nodded, though she felt far from all right. "Your face," she said, reaching up to touch a cut above his eye. He caught her hand, squeezing it reassuringly. "It's nothing." "It's not nothing, Isaac. This is exactly what I was afraid would happen." Before he could respond, Sheriff Monroe approached them. "Quinn, a word," Isaac nodded, giving Olivia's hand one more squeeze before releasing it. "I'll be right back." Olivia watched as the two men moved to a quiet corner, their conversation too low for her to hear. Sheriff Monroe's expression was grave as Isaac spoke, occasionally glancing in her direction. When they finished, the sheriff tipped his hat to Olivia before departing, leaving them alone in the damaged saloon. "What did he say?" she asked as Isaac returned to her side. "That William's been talking about causing trouble for weeks. Several people have heard him making threats against both of us." Isaac sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Monroe said he'll keep an eye on things, but he can only do so much. The Thorpes have a lot of influence in this county." Olivia stood, surveying the wreckage of what had been a lovely evening. "This is my fault." "No," Isaac said firmly, turning her to face him. "This is William Thorpe's fault, not yours. If I weren't in your life, if you weren't in my life, I'd still be drifting from town to town, not caring about tomorrow." His hands cradled her face gently. Don't you understand yet, Olivia? You're not a burden to be endured. You're the reason I stay." The naked emotion in his voice broke through her defenses. Tears filled her eyes as she finally allowed herself to believe what he had been trying to show her for months, that his feelings for her were real, unwavering despite the obstacles they faced. "I'm afraid he'll hurt you," she whispered. "I can take care of myself." Isaac's thumb brushed away a tear that had escaped down her cheek. "And I can take care of you too if you'll let me." The intimacy of the moment, the tenderness in his touch, and the months of growing affection between them culminated in a single, inevitable truth that Olivia could no longer deny: she had fallen in love with Isaac Quinn. "I don't want to be the reason you get hurt," she said softly. "And I don't want to be the reason you keep denying yourself happiness," he countered. "We deserve a chance, Olivia. Both of us." Outside, the blizzard howled, snow piling against the windows and transforming Wilson into a world of white. Inside, in the wreckage of the saloon, Olivia finally surrendered to the hope she had been fighting for so long. "Yes," she whispered, "we do." Isaac's smile was like sunrise breaking through clouds. Slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, he lowered his mouth to hers. The kiss was gentle at first, a question more than a demand. When she responded, her hands coming up to rest against his chest, it deepened into something more profound: a promise, a beginning. When they finally parted, both slightly breathless, Isaac rested his forehead against hers. "I've been wanting to do that since the first day you walked into my saloon." She laughed softly, a sound of pure joy that surprised even her. "And I've been telling myself not to want it for just as long." "Stubborn woman," he murmured affectionately. "Persistent man," she replied in kind. They stood together in the quiet aftermath of chaos, snow falling silently outside, the wreckage of the saloon around them somehow transformed into the setting for a new chapter in both their lives. "We should clean up," Olivia said eventually, practical concerns reasserting themselves. "It can wait until morning," Isaac replied, taking her hand. "I need to get you home before the snow gets any deeper." The journey to Olivia's cottage was difficult, the blizzard having transformed familiar streets into an unrecognizable landscape of white. By the time they arrived, both were chilled to the bone despite the heavy coats Isaac had insisted they wear from the saloon's coat rack. "You can't ride back to your place in this," Olivia said as they stamped snow from their boots on her porch. "It's gotten worse." Isaac nodded, surveying the whiteout conditions. "I'll sleep in the stable. Your reputation hang my reputation," she interrupted with uncharacteristic vehemence. "I won't have you freeze to death for the sake of propriety." He raised an eyebrow, a smile playing at his lips. "Miss Foster, are you inviting me to stay the night?" Despite everything, she felt her cheeks warm. "In the guest room, Mr. Quinn. Let's not get ahead of ourselves." His laugh was warm and rich as they entered the small house together, shutting the door firmly against the storm. Olivia quickly built up the fire while Isaac saw to his horse in the tiny lean-to stable attached to the cottage. When he returned, she had hot coffee waiting and a simple meal of bread, cheese, and cold ham from her larder. They ate in comfortable silence, the events of the evening creating a new awareness between them. "I meant what I said," Isaac said finally, setting down his coffee cup. "About taking care of you, about us deserving a chance." Olivia nodded slowly. "I know you did, and I meant what I said too." She hesitated, then added softly, "I've been afraid for so long, Isaac. Afraid to hope, afraid to believe that anything good could happen to me again. But you make me brave enough to try." He reached across the table, taking her hand in his. "That's all I ask." They spent the remainder of the evening really talking about their hopes, their fears, the future they might build together if they were willing to fight for it. As the fire burned low and the hour grew late, Olivia showed Isaac to the small guest room that had once belonged to her brother. "Sleep well," she said softly, lingering in the doorway. He caught her hand, bringing it to his lips in a gesture that made her heart skip. "Sweet dreams, Olivia." As she lay in her own bed later, listening to the howl of the blizzard outside, Olivia found herself smiling into the darkness. For the first time since her world had collapsed around her, she allowed herself to believe that tomorrow might indeed be better than today. The blizzard lasted 3 days, effectively cutting Wilson off from the outside world. Streets became impassable as snow drifted higher than some windows, and the temperature dropped low enough to freeze the ink in inkwells. Olivia and Isaac spent those days in a domestic bubble that felt like a glimpse into a possible future. They took turns cooking meals from her limited stores, read to each other from her small collection of books, and talked for hours about everything and nothing. On the second night, as they sat before the fire, Olivia found the courage to ask him something that had been on her mind. "Do you ever think about leaving Wilson, starting fresh somewhere people don't know either of us?" Isaac considered the question, his expression thoughtful in the firelight. "Sometimes," he admitted, "it would be easier in some ways." He turned to look at her directly. "Is that what you want?" She sighed, watching the flames dance. "I don't know. This has been my home my entire life. Even when it turned against me, I couldn't bring myself to leave." She paused, gathering her thoughts. "But I also know that some wounds may never heal. Some people will never forgive me for what my father and brother did, no matter how long I stay or how I try to prove myself. And some people will," Isaac pointed out gently. "Sheriff Monroe defended you tonight. Mrs. Parker may have stopped Emma's lessons, but I've seen her nod to you in the street lately. Things are changing, Olivia, slowly but surely." "Because of you," she said softly. "You made people see me differently." He shook his head. "I just refused to see you the way they wanted me to. You did the rest yourself with your dignity, your music, your determination to keep going despite everything." The firelight illuminated the tenderness in his eyes, making Olivia's heart swell with emotions she was only now allowing herself to acknowledge fully. When he reached for her, she went willingly into his arms, finding there the sanctuary she had long been denied. Their kiss this time was deeper, filled with the promise of all they could be together. Olivia felt herself responding with a passion she had never experienced before, her body awakening to sensations both new and exhilarating. It was Isaac who pulled back first, his breathing uneven. "We should stop," he murmured against her hair, "before I forget myself entirely." Though part of her wanted to protest, Olivia nodded her agreement. Whatever was growing between them deserved time, deserved to be honored properly. "When the snow clears," Isaac said, still holding her close, "I'd like to court you openly, Olivia. No more pretending we're just business associates or neighbors, if you'll have me." She leaned back to look at him, searching his face for any hint of doubt or reservation. Finding none, she smiled. "I'd like that, Isaac. Very much." On the morning of the 4th day, the storm finally abated, leaving Wilson buried under feet of snow. The temperature rose enough that men began digging paths between buildings, and by noon, the main street had been partially cleared. Isaac reluctantly prepared to return to the saloon, needing to assess the damage and begin repairs. "I'll come back this evening," he promised as he donned his coat, "unless you'd prefer to have your home to yourself again." Olivia smiled, helping him wrap a scarf around his neck. "I find I rather enjoy your company, Mr. Quinn, even after 3 days of being snowbound together." "High praise indeed, Miss Foster." He kissed her lightly, still marveling at the freedom to do so. "I'll see you tonight, then." She watched from the window as he made his way down the newly shoveled path. his tall figure eventually disappearing around a bend in the road. Only then did she allow herself a moment of doubt, wondering if what had grown between them during their snow-bound isolation would survive exposure to the harsh realities of Wilson. Later that afternoon, as Olivia was inventorying her depleted pantry, a knock at the door startled her. Thinking Isaac had returned earlier than expected, she opened it with a smile that quickly faded when she found Sheriff Monroe on her porch instead. "Miss Foster," he said, removing his hat. "May I come in? I'm afraid I have some news." The gravity in his tone sent a chill through her that had nothing to do with the winter air. "Of course," she said, stepping aside. "What's happened?" Monroe entered, declining her offer of coffee. "It's about Quinn," he said without preamble. "There was trouble at the saloon." Olivia's hand flew to her throat. "Is he hurt?" "Not badly," Monroe assured her quickly. "But William Thorpe and his brothers showed up while Quinn was cleaning. Words were exchanged, then blows." "Again?" Olivia sank into a chair. "Sheriff, surely you can do something about William's behavior." Monroe's expression was grim. "That's why I'm here, Miss Foster." Thorpe pulled a knife. Quinn defended himself, and in the struggle Thorpe was seriously injured. "He's with the doctor now, but—" He hesitated. "It doesn't look good." The world seemed to tilt beneath Olivia's feet. "Where is Isaac now?" "In my jail," Monroe said simply. "For his own protection as much as anything. The Thorpe boys are out for blood, and their father is on his way back from Topeka. I thought it best to keep Quinn secure until things cool down." "This is my fault," Olivia whispered, echoing her words from the night of the first fight. "If I hadn't—" "This is William Thorpe's fault," Monroe interrupted firmly, unknowingly echoing Isaac's response. "He's been looking for trouble since Quinn took an interest in you. Everyone in town knows it." "Will they charge Isaac?" she asked, dreading the answer. "Depends on whether Thorpe lives and what witnesses say happened. I've got deputies taking statements now." Olivia stood, reaching for her coat. "I need to see him." Monroe hesitated, then nodded. "I figured you might. That's partly why I came personally to escort you safely. The Thorpe brothers have been making threats against you as well." The walk to the jailhouse was tense, Olivia acutely aware of the stares and whispers that followed them through town. News traveled fast in Wilson, and it seemed everyone was already aware of what had happened. Isaac was in the furthest cell, separated from the usual drunk and disorderly occupants of the jail. He rose quickly when Olivia entered, his face showing relief followed immediately by concern. "You shouldn't be here," he said as she rushed to the bars that separated them. "It's not safe." "Neither should you," she replied, reaching through to touch his bruised face. "Are you truly all right?" "Nothing that won't heal," he assured her. "Olivia, listen to me. If things go badly, if Thorpe doesn't make it, don't," she cut him off. "Don't speak of such things." Sheriff Monroe cleared his throat from the doorway. "I can give you folks a few minutes, but then I need to finish taking Quinn's statement." Once they were alone, Isaac grasped Olivia's hands through the bars. "If the worst happens, I need you to leave Wilson," he said urgently. "The Thorpes won't rest until they've exacted their revenge, and if they can't reach me, they'll turn on you." "I won't leave you," she insisted. "Promise me, Olivia." His grip tightened. "I couldn't bear it if something happened to you because of me." The irony of the situation, their roles now reversed, with him asking her to save herself while he faced the consequences, was not lost on either of them. "Nothing is going to happen to either of us," Olivia said with more confidence than she felt. "William will recover, witnesses will confirm you acted in self-defense, and this will all be behind us soon." Isaac's smile was sad. "I wish I shared your optimism." "Someone once told me that hope is worth fighting for," she reminded him gently. "I believe that now because of you, So don't you dare give up on us, Isaac Quinn." Their time together was cut short by Monroe's return. As Olivia reluctantly prepared to leave, Isaac called after her. "I love you, Olivia Foster," he said simply, loudly enough for the sheriff to hear as well. "Whatever happens, know that." Tears blurred her vision as she replied, "And I love you, Isaac Quinn, more than I ever thought possible." The next 3 days were the longest of Olivia's life. William Thorpe lingered between life and death, his condition changing hourly according to the reports Olivia managed to glean from sympathetic townspeople. Isaac remained in jail, though Monroe allowed her to visit daily, always under his personal supervision. On the 4th day, just as Olivia was preparing to make her usual trip to the jailhouse, a knock came at her door. She opened it to find Mrs. Hawkins standing on her porch, her expression uncharacteristically uncertain. "May I come in, Miss Foster?" the older woman asked stiffly. "I believe we need to talk." Surprised, Olivia stepped aside. Mrs. Hawkins had been one of her most vocal critics since her family's downfall, and they had exchanged few words beyond the most basic civilities in months. "What can I do for you, Mrs. Hawkins?" Olivia asked once they were seated in her small sitting room. The older woman smoothed her skirts nervously. "It's about Mr. Quinn and William Thorpe." Olivia tensed. "Has there been news?" "William regained consciousness this morning," Mrs. Hawkins informed her. "Dr. Simmons believes he will recover, though it may be a long convalescence." Relief flooded through Olivia. "Thank God." "Indeed." Mrs. Hawkins hesitated, then continued, "The reason I've come is, I was there, Miss Foster, at the saloon when it happened." Olivia stared at her in surprise. "You were?" The older woman nodded. "I had gone to speak with Mr. Quinn about supplying linens for his expansion plans. I arrived just as the Thorpe boys entered. I hid behind the bar when I saw trouble brewing. I saw everything." "And?" Olivia prompted when Mrs. Hawkins fell silent. "And William Thorpe is a liar and a scoundrel," the woman burst out vehemently. "He attacked Mr. Quinn without provocation, pulled a knife on him when Mr. Quinn was simply defending himself. The injury was entirely Thorpe's own fault. He lunged and fell on his own blade when Mr. Quinn sidestepped him." Olivia could hardly believe what she was hearing. "Have you told Sheriff Monroe this?" "I have not," Mrs. Hawkins admitted, looking down at her hands. "I was afraid. The Thorpes are powerful in this county, and I'm a widow with little to my name besides my reputation." Understanding dawned on Olivia. And associating with me, even to tell the truth, might damage that reputation. Mrs. Hawkins had the grace to look ashamed. "Yes. But I've been preying on it, Miss Foster, and I cannot in good conscience allow an innocent man to suffer when I know the truth." She straightened her shoulders. "I'm going to the sheriff as soon as I leave here. I wanted you to know first." Impulsively, Olivia reached across to grasp the older woman's hand. "Thank you, Mrs. Hawkins. Your courage may save an innocent man's life." "It's not courage," Mrs. Hawkins replied, though she didn't withdraw her hand. "It's simple Christian duty. Something I fear I've been neglecting where you're concerned, Miss Foster." She paused, then added quietly, "I was wrong about you, and about Mr. Quinn. I hope you can forgive an old woman's harsh judgment." Before Olivia could respond, another knock came at the door, more urgent this time. She opened it to find Sheriff Monroe. "Miss Foster," he said, his expression grave, "I need you to come with me immediately. Thorpe is conscious and has made his statement. He's claiming Quinn attacked him without provocation. Judge Harmon is holding a hearing within the hour to determine whether to bind Quinn over for trial." Olivia turned to Mrs. Hawkins, who was already rising from her seat. "Sheriff," the older woman said firmly, "I believe I have information that will be relevant to your hearing." Monroe looked between the two women, confusion evident on his face. "Madam, I witnessed the altercation," Mrs. Hawkins explained, "and I am prepared to testify under oath as to what truly occurred." Relief washed over the sheriff's features. "Well now, that changes things considerably. If you'll both accompany me." The next hour passed in a blur for Olivia. The hearing, hastily convened in Judge Harmon's chambers rather than the formal courtroom, consisted of statements from William Thorpe, delivered from his sick by proxy, Isaac, and the unexpected but pivotal testimony of Mrs. Martha Hawkins. The judge, a stern man with a reputation for fairness, listened to all accounts before rendering his decision. Based on the evidence presented, particularly the eyewitness testimony of Mrs. Hawkins, whose character is beyond reproach, I find that Mr. Quinn acted in legitimate self-defense. All charges are hereby dismissed. Jubilation filled Olivia as Isaac was officially released from custody. He embraced her tightly as soon as they were outside the judge's chambers, lifting her slightly off her feet in his enthusiasm. "I can't believe it's over," she whispered against his neck. "Thanks to Mrs. Hawkins," Isaac agreed, setting her down to shake the older woman's hand warmly. "I owe you a debt I can never repay, madam," Mrs. Hawkins sniffed, though her eyes were suspiciously bright. "You owe me nothing, young man. Truth is its own reward." She patted Olivia's hand awkwardly. "And perhaps I owe Miss Foster an apology for some of my past behavior." "Consider it forgotten," Olivia assured her, her heart too full of joy to harbor any resentment. Their celebration was short-lived, however. As they descended the courthouse steps, a carriage pulled up sharply, and an imposing figure emerged: Jeremiah Thorpe, William's father and one of the most powerful men in the county. "Quinn," he bellowed, his face mottled with rage, "you nearly killed my boy." Sheriff Monroe moved quickly to intercept him. "Now, Jeremiah, the matter's been settled legally. Judge Harmon ruled it was self-defense." "To hell with Harmon," Thorpe snarled. "My son is lying in bed with a hole in his gut, and this man walks free." He jabbed a finger at Isaac. "This isn't over, Quinn, not by a long shot." Isaac stepped forward, placing himself slightly in front of Olivia. "Mr. Thorpe, I regret what happened with your son. I never intended for anyone to be injured." "Your regrets won't heal, William," Thorpe spat. "But I can promise you this: you're finished in Wilson. By the time I'm done, you won't be able to sell a single drink in that saloon of yours. No one will do business with you, no one will speak to you, no one will even acknowledge your existence." His gaze shifted to Olivia, hatred burning in his eyes. "And as for you, Foster, you've brought nothing but misery to this town since the day your father emptied its coffers. It's high time you both were gone." "That's enough, Jeremiah," Sheriff Monroe said firmly. "Make your threats elsewhere, or I'll have you in a cell for disturbing the peace." With a final venomous glare, Thorpe returned to his carriage and drove away, leaving a tense silence in his wake. "He means it," Olivia said quietly. "The Thorpes don't make idle threats." Isaac's jaw was set in a determined line. "Neither do I. And I promise to stand by you, Olivia. That hasn't changed." But as they walked back to the Lone Star to assess the damage and begin repairs once more, both knew that their troubles were far from over. Jeremiah Thorpe's influence extended throughout the county and beyond. If he truly set his mind to destroying them, their life in Wilson would become even more difficult than before. That evening, as they sat in the partially restored saloon after a long day of cleaning and repairing, Isaac raised the question Olivia had been anticipating. "What if we did leave?" he asked, swirling the whiskey in his glass thoughtfully. "Start fresh somewhere else, just like you suggested during the blizzard." Olivia considered the question, watching the lamplight play across his features. "Is that what you want?" I want to be with you," he said simply. "Here, there, anywhere. But I also want you to be happy, to have a life free from the kind of hatred we saw today." She reached across the table, taking his hand. "The truth is, I've been tied to this place by memories, some good, many painful. I stayed because leaving felt like admitting defeat, like proving the town right about me." She paused, gathering her thoughts. But perhaps true strength lies in knowing when to walk away, in choosing a new path rather than fighting endlessly on a battlefield where victory may never come. Isaac's fingers tightened around hers. "Where would we go?" "West," she suggested. "Colorado, perhaps, or even California, somewhere we could truly begin anew." "What about the saloon, all the plans we've made?" Olivia smiled softly. "Plans can change, Isaac. The saloon was your dream for Wilson. Perhaps we need to find a new dream for a new place." He brought her hand to his lips, pressing a gentle kiss to her knuckles. "Are you certain, Olivia? Leaving is no small thing." "I've never been more certain of anything," she replied, surprising herself with the truth of the words. "Except perhaps how I feel about you." The decision made, they began preparations to leave Wilson behind. Isaac found a buyer for the Lone Star, not at the price he might have hoped for before Jeremiah Thorpe's campaign against him, but enough to give them a fresh start elsewhere. Olivia's cottage proved harder to sell, the Foster name still carrying its taint, but eventually a newcomer to town purchased it for a fair price. As word spread of their imminent departure, Olivia was surprised by the reactions of the townspeople. Some, predictably, viewed their leaving as confirmation of guilt or weakness, but others more than she would have expected expressed regret. Mrs. Hawkins, who had become something of an unexpected ally, organized a small farewell gathering at the church. "Not everyone in Wilson shares the Thorpes' views," she told Olivia firmly. "Some of us have come to see the error in our judgment." The evening before their departure, as they packed the last of their belongings into crates for the morning stage, Isaac pulled a small box from his pocket. "I had planned to do this differently," he said, a hint of nervousness in his voice. "Perhaps under more romantic circumstances, but it seems time is of the essence." Olivia watched, her heart suddenly racing as he opened the box to reveal a simple gold ring set with a single modest diamond. "Isaac," she breathed. He took her hand gently. "I know we've only known each other for a short time, but I've never been more certain of anything in my life. I love you, Olivia Foster. Would you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" Tears blurred her vision as she nodded. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, Isaac Quinn, I will marry you." He slipped the ring onto her finger where it caught the lamplight and sparkled. "I wasn't sure." He began, then stopped. "That is, I know we haven't discussed the specifics of our future together." Olivia understood his hesitation. "You mean children," she said softly. He nodded. "I would understand if, after everything you've been through, you might not want." "I do want," she assured him quickly. "Very much. A family with you, Isaac. Nothing would make me happier." His smile was radiant as he gathered her into his arms, holding her as if she were the most precious thing in the world. "Then let's build that family, Mrs. Quinn to be, in a place where our children can grow up without the shadow of the past hanging over them." They were married the next morning in a simple ceremony performed by the town preacher, with Mrs. Hawkins and Sheriff Monroe as their witnesses. By noon, they were aboard the westbound stage, watching Wilson recede into the distance as they began their journey toward a new life together. The years that followed proved Isaac's promise to Olivia had been no idle declaration. Each day, in ways both large and small, he showed her that she was worthy of love, that her past did not define her, that together they could build something beautiful from the ashes of what had been. They settled eventually in a growing town in Colorado, where Isaac's experience as a saloon keeper and Olivia's head for business allowed them to establish a successful hotel and restaurant. No one there knew the story of the Foster family, and if rumors occasionally reached them from Kansas, they found the community willing to judge them on their present actions rather than past associations. Their first child, a son they named Thomas, arrived a year after their arrival in Colorado. He was followed 2 years later by twins, a boy and a girl, Michael and Sarah. Olivia took to motherhood with a joy that surprised even her, finding in her children's unconditional love a healing balm for old wounds. Isaac proved to be a devoted father, teaching their sons to ride and hunt, while ensuring they also learned to respect the women in their lives. He read to all 3 children each night before bed, instilling in them a love of learning that Olivia, who had resumed teaching piano to supplement their income, heartily encouraged. They spoke of Wilson occasionally, especially as the children grew old enough to ask questions about their parents' past. Olivia and Isaac chose honesty, explaining in age-appropriate terms the circumstances that had brought them together and eventually led them west. But if Grandpa hadn't made those mistakes and if Uncle Daniel hadn't gotten in trouble, you and Papa might never have met, young Sarah observed once, her child's logic cutting straight to the heart of the matter. That's true, Olivia acknowledged. Sometimes good things can come from difficult circumstances. The important thing is how we choose to respond to them. As the years passed, their hotel prospered, allowing them to expand and eventually open a second location in a neighboring town. Their children grew, each developing distinct personalities and interests. Thomas showed a talent for business that mirrored his parents, while Michael developed a passion for medicine that led him to apprentice with the local doctor. Sarah, to her mother's delight, inherited Olivia's musical abilities and added to them a voice that could bring tears to the eyes of even the most hardened cowboys who frequented their establishment. News from Wilson reached them sporadically. Mrs. Hawkins wrote occasionally, keeping them informed of town developments. William Thorpe had recovered physically from his injury, but seemed diminished somehow, his bullying ways replaced by a bitter withdrawal from society. His father had lost much of his influence after a series of poor investments, and the family name no longer carried the weight it once had. Sheriff Monroe visited once, passing through on his way to San Francisco, and spent an enjoyable evening catching up with the Quinns. Wilson's changed, he told them over dinner. New railroad spur brought in different people, different ideas. The old grudges are fading as the town looks forward instead of back. Do you think we could ever return? Olivia asked, more from curiosity than any real desire to do so. Monroe considered the question thoughtfully. You'd be welcome now, I think. Time has a way of healing wounds, even those that seemed permanent. But from what I can see, he gestured around at their thriving hotel, you've built something pretty fine here. We have indeed, Isaac agreed, his hand finding Olivia's under the table and squeezing gently. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Isaac surprised Olivia with a special gift, a new piano for the hotel lobby, grander than any she had played before. That evening, as their children and friends gathered to celebrate, she performed a selection of pieces that had marked significant moments in their life together, concluding with the hymn that had been played at their wedding. As applause filled the room, Isaac joined her on the bench, wrapping an arm around her waist. "Happy anniversary, my love," he murmured against her ear. 20 years, she marveled. Sometimes it feels like yesterday that I stumbled into your saloon, hiding from a jeering crowd. And sometimes it feels like I've loved you forever, he replied. Thank you for taking a chance on a drifting cowboy who couldn't mind his own business. Olivia smiled, leaning into his embrace. "Thank you for proving me wrong, Isaac Quinn, every single day." As they looked out over the gathering, their children now grown or nearly so, their friends and neighbors who had come to celebrate with them, the life they had built together through both joy and hardship, Olivia reflected on the journey that had brought them here. From the ashes of disgrace and isolation in Wilson, Kansas, to this moment of fullness and belonging, it had been a path neither of them could have foreseen. "You ever regret it?" she asked softly. "Standing up for me that day, knowing what it would cost you?" Isaac's answer was immediate and unwavering, just as it had been every time she had doubted over their years together. "Not for a single moment, Olivia Quinn. Loving you has been the greatest privilege of my life." And as he kissed her there, in front of their gathered loved ones, Olivia knew with absolute certainty what she had come to believe a little more each day for the past 20 years, that she was indeed worthy of being loved, completely and without reservation. Isaac Quinn had promised to prove it to her every day for the rest of their lives, and he had kept that promise beyond her wildest dreams.